So this is that fancy machine that I'm going to be using, the Audacity. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I can record it directly on the computer, which is very convenient, so I don't have to transfer anything afterwards. Okay, and so the video cast, the screencast is going to start with those voice things. Now, we finished talking about heart, okay? So I want to remind you that when I introduced you to the cardiovascular system, I told you that it's plumbing. A bunch of pipes and the pump in the center. So we pretty much discussed how pump works. Now we need to see what pipes are made of, what types of blood vessels we have in the body, and how blood vessels participate in the maintenance of homeostasis. By this time, right now, I think you must be sick of the word homeostasis, because we always talk, oh, homeostasis this, homeostasis that. But one of the attractions of the cardiovascular system is that it's so relevant to many clinical conditions, and so relevant, and you can fairly easily imagine how physiology of the heart and physiology of the blood vessels define the course development of different aspects of cardiovascular disease. Two types of blood, well, there are three types of blood vessels, okay? Arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries carry the blood away from the heart, as you know. That's illustrated here. They usually picture it in red, which represents the function of arteries in the systemic circulation as the blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood. Veins bring the blood back to the heart from the tissues. They are usually depicted blue since they carry, well, in the systemic circuit, they carry oxygen-poor blood. Veins and arteries do not immediately merge one into another. They are separated by the blood vessels that are called capillaries or capillaries. I call them capillaries. Capillaries form so-called capillary beds in each and every organ and tissue that is vascularized. So you will have capillary beds, networks of capillaries in muscle, in the liver, the kidney, in the heart, you name it. That clear? We distinguish them. Okay, before we move on to the structure, let me ask you, how can we tell that arteries, veins, and capillaries are different? I mean, what makes them different? What they have different? Different? So can you summarize? I can't ask the good question. That's the problem. So I know what answer I want, but my question doesn't lead you to that answer. What I'm asking is, when you look at two different organs, like liver and spleen, you can tell they are different. Why? In a very simple terms. They look different. Arteries and veins look different. They have different structure. Capillaries have also different structure. Since they have different structure, what is different as well? Function. Does that make sense? They're all vessels, they all carry blood, but deeper, they have different functions, different structures. Is that clear? Okay. Arteries and veins are composed of three tunics, pretty much three layers. Tunica intima, the layer that is closest to the lumen, immediately surrounds the lumen, the innermost layer. tunica media in the middle, and tunica externa, the outermost layer of the vessel wall. Tunica intima consists of the layer of squamous epithelial cells that we call endothelium. Okay? Endothelial cells that I can depict something like that, they're pretty flat, are attached to the basement membrane that is often called a basal lamina. The reason we call that layer of simple squamous epithelium that you can kind of sort of see here, so you see this and this, the inside surface of the vessel is covered with that simple squamous epithelium. The reason we call it endothelial cell is because those cells are slightly different, should I say, from regular simple squamous cells. They have a lot of functions. So epithelium, what is the function of epithelial cells in general? What is the function of epithelial tissue? What does epithelial tissue do? To answer this question, you have to think where it is. Is that epithelium? Yes. In my mouth, that epithelium? Yep. Nose? It protects. But look, air, epithelium, body. Air or food, epithelium, body. Inside my stomach, there's some chemical stuff, epithelium, rest of the body. It separates. Of course it protects. Some protect more, some protect less. But it separates. Okay? So in this case, epithelium separates blood and the rest. And this epithelium that I'm going to call, and everybody calls, endothelial cells, plays a crucial role in events like inflammation, hemostasis, so coagulation of the blood. It doesn't technically let microbes to get from blood to tissue. So it plays so many roles that it gained its own name. Okay, tunica media here is pretty much a thick or not so thick in arteries, not so thick in veins, layer of smooth muscles. Okay, that layer is interspersed by the elastic fibers, which smooth muscles allow blood vessels to change their diameter, and elastic fibers let blood vessels to expand and recoil in response to changes in the blood pressure. I really want you to question every statement that I make, and if it doesn't make sense to you, ask me about it. Okay? So again, smooth muscles regulate the diameter of the blood vessel. They can change it. Blood vessel can constrict and dilate, right? And if you increase the blood pressure, some blood vessels can expand in response to that and recoil. So they're elastic. Okay. Tunica externa consists of the collagen fibers, the connective tissue. Okay. It gives the blood vessel a structure. Okay. Nerve fibers that signal to the smooth muscles are located in the tunica externa. Lymphatic vessels. And the structure known as vasomotor. Let's stop at this point and talk about the structure a little bit more. What is in the blood vessel? In the lumen? Blood, right? What is the function of the blood? Although we didn't discuss it in details, but what's the function of the blood? Carry nutrients, oxygen, waste. So cells that comprise the wall of the blood vessel. Where would they get their nutrients and oxygen? You think from the blood in the vessel? Here's the problem. If the vessel wall is thin, very, very thin, then it's okay. But if it's thick, then oxygen and nutrients won't be able to diffuse from the blood to the outermost part of the blood vessel. Remember we opened the heart, we worked with the heart, the big heart, and you looked at the pulmonary trunk and aorta, and vena cava. The walls were pretty thick. They weren't microscopic. I mean, they were millimeter maybe. In the body, the diffusion distance, pretty much the maximum distance for diffusion, is 50 micrometers. So 1/20th of millimeter. That's why in big vessels, the walls of the big vessels have their own blood supply. Does that make sense? The wall has its own blood supply. Is that clear? Little tiny vessels, you can see them on this illustration as blue and red dots, okay? This blood supply of the vessel wall is called vasa vasorum. Does that make sense? Now, veins and arteries share a lot of common anatomical properties, but capillaries are completely different. Sorry. Capillaries have only two pretty much parts of the wall. They have endothelial cells and they have basal lamina. They don't have tunics essentially. They don't have tunic externa, they don't have tunica media, they don't have smooth muscles. And since they don't have smooth muscles, what they cannot do, yes, they can stretch very limited amount, but they cannot contract and dilate sort of, wouldn't say voluntarily, but they cannot constrict. Does that make sense? They cannot dilate either. So their diameter is pretty much fixed. So let's take a look at the arteries. Bless you. There are three types of arteries. The largest arteries are elastic. Arteries like aorta and branches of aorta like brachiocephalic trunk, carotid arteries, subclavian arteries, renal arteries. They are the big vessels are elastic. So there's a lot of elastic fibers in all three tunics, tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica externa. They have big diameter. Remember that aorta that we saw in the pig? It's fairly similar to what humans have in terms of diameter. So that large diameter means that resistance to flow is small. When I say resistance to flow, my best advice that I have, think about the straw. If you drink, I don't know, soda through the regular straw, it's fairly easy. If you try to drink it through the coffee stirrer, it's going to be harder. So the bigger the diameter, the easier it is to flow, right? They do not dilate and constrict surprisingly. Well, I can give you an example. Explanation why it would be detrimental. Imagine you have a carotid artery. Carotid artery delivers blood to half of the head. Half of the brain, essentially. One carotid artery, half of the brain. Now imagine there is some sort of a stimulus, nervous stimulus, that causes carotid artery to constrict. What's going to happen to you? Huh? Well, you're going to faint right away. You're going to be lightheaded, actually faint, if it constricts. So since they distribute blood to such big parts of the body, like organs, like liver, brain, kidneys. You can't just shut down the blood flow to those parts. And you can't increase it massively. So, yes. Oh, no. It's stretching all you want. It is stretching. How to say? You have to differentiate. I see the confusion. So there are two types of responses. One is the muscular response. When there's a signal and our artery constricts or muscles dilate. Muscles can make it narrow, muscles can make it wide. Does that make sense? Another response is a pressure. If pressure increases, elastic artery will stretch to compensate for that increasing pressure. Does that make sense? Yes.
So it's kind of like a rubber band, like you can stretch it, but like once it's like relaxed, like the elastic ones basically can like expand, but they can't like.
They can't constrict. Yes. I want to use plumbing as an analogy. So imagine you have a water tank, and you have a main pipe coming off that water tank that then distributes water all over the house. The faucet, you don't install it on the main water pipe, right? You install it, not the faucet, how you call them? The thingies, the turn, yeah, when you need to wash your hands, you don't go down in a basement and open the water in the basement for the entire house. And then when you're done, you don't go down there and shut it down. You have local ones, right? Same here. This arteries, the elastic arteries, they don't regulate blood flow that much. They regulate blood pressure. If blood pressure goes up, they will stretch. If it goes to normal, they will shrink back. Does that make sense? Okay? Muscular. Muscular arteries are next one, branches of elastic. They deliver blood to parts of the organs, okay? And they actually can dilate and contract, okay? So they respond. Arterioles are the smallest ones. So this picture shows you the proportion of the muscle tissue in the muscular arteries and arterioles. So arterioles are the blood vessels with a diameter less than 100 micrometers. So if you want to, the comparison, human hair is a little less than 100 micrometers. So they're really, really tiny, right? But they regulate local blood flow. So say, if you do this to your nail, and then you release the pressure, your nail for some time is white, right? Because you squeezed arterioles in the skin under the nail. Does that make sense? That's why it's white. You're not closing any arteries. You're closing arterioles. They're small, okay? They regulate local pressure. Like if you do this, you're going to see white area around the pressure points, but everything else is going to be fine. Yes? Say again? Oh no, that you block more than arteriole. And it's also a nerve, yes.
So then what's the difference between, like, are the arterioles still bigger than capillaries?
Oh yeah. We're getting there. So the big functional difference is that all these blood vessels have pretty fast blood flow. Okay, they all, except for elastic arteries, muscular arteries and arterioles can constrict and dilate. Okay, there's virtually no exchange of anything across the wall. One of the reasons for that, the blood flow is extremely fast. Try to jump out of the fast running train. I mean, you're not going to do that. right? I mean, it's just impossible to get from the fast running something. If cells will try to stick to the vessel wall, they will be washed away. So there's no exchange, and the vessel wall is extremely thick. Okay. Now these guys have thick walls, active vasomotor response. Again, not for elastic, but muscular arterioles. They regulate their diameter pretty effectively. Okay. What about veins? In veins, I put the order differently. If you think about this, veins collect the blood from the tissues. When I pause after the statement, I pretty much am waiting for your approval. Like, if you tell me no, then we're going to go over my statement again. They collect the blood from the tissues to bring it back to the heart. Good? So we start with the smallest veins, that like baby veins called venules. They kind of here, okay? Post-capillary venules. So they are after the capillaries. So the blood goes artery, capillary, vein. Does that make sense? So that's why these veins are called post-capillary. They are small and they are slow. During the break, I need to do so many things during the break. The break is going to be probably like an hour. I will try to find a video of the vein, the post-capillary vein and the arteriole. I have my own videos of those. Okay? And I will show you, and you will immediately see the difference. Okay? So flow in post-capillary venules is slow. They are, well, when we say porous, don't take it literally. Not that there are holes in the walls, no. What I mean is that the small venules have permeable walls. So blood cells, like white blood cells, can crawl through the wall into the peripheral tissue. Does that make sense? Okay. Smallest venules cannot contract or dilate. They don't have smooth muscle. They have connective tissue, okay? Smallest one don't have smooth muscles. Of course they have endothelium. As they become bigger, so as the smaller venules merge into the large ones, more and more smooth muscle appears. So large veins can have certain vasomotor responses. Let me put it this way. There are chemical stimuli that can force arteriole to constrict or dilate. Arteriole can constrict 100%, so it can collapse. Or it can dilate 100%. So if it had diameter of 50, it will become 100. You see? With venule, small venule, well, very small vein actually. Large venule, small vein, there is no threshold. Okay? Bless you. I once observed the vasomotor response, and it was something like about 10-15%. So they're not really changing the diameter that much. Okay? Now, compared to the arteries, lumen of the vein is larger, walls are thinner, and blood pressure in the veins is lower. The flow through the veins is slow. That is why, one of the reasons, veins are called capacitance vessels. Now you need to try to imagine something. We have about 5.25 liters of blood. Okay, the adult is 5.25 liters of blood. Does that make sense so far? Good. So this 5.25 liters of blood never stand. They always flow. Faster or slower, but they always flow. Like a river. If you go to the rapids, the name explains itself, right? It's fast. But then you enter the valley when it becomes wider, and the water moves slower, but it moves. Same goes for the blood. Now think about this. When blood moves through the arteries, they have small lumen, okay, and blood moves very fast through them. So in any given moment, there is very little blood in the arteries. Like if you will freeze the picture, like freeze the person, freeze the body, okay, and we'll measure how much blood is in the arteries, it will be not a lot, 15%. Does that make sense? But if you will measure the volume of blood that's in the veins, 60% of the blood is in the veins at any given moment. That's why they are called capacitance vessel. Right? They pretty much store blood. Does that make sense? Capacitance. Capacity, from the word capacity. Capacitance. Capacitance vessels. Okay? Venous sinuses is a kind of a special type of vein. They just flat. Okay? With thin walls. Like coronary sinus that goes in the back portion of the heart and collects the blood from the heart muscle, or sinuses, like dural sinuses in the head. Okay, they just shaped differently. And the last thing before we go to the break, just to kind of make a logical break, capillaries. They small. Please don't try to convince me that capillaries have muscles. They don't, ever. All they have is endothelium and basal lamina. So in this picture, endothelium is shown as those red cells, basal lamina as the white coverage outside. Does that make sense? So if you will cut it across, you will see the basal lamina and endothelial cells on top of it. So that's going to be lumen, that's going to be tissue. Does that make sense? Some capillaries, for instance, capillaries in the retina, have additional cells around them that are called parasites. They don't belong to the capillary itself. Parasites just increase the stability of the vessel. Does that make sense? Just like they keep it integral, right? Capillaries are small. They have a diameter of a single red blood cell. It's about 9 micrometers. Okay? So technically it's a tunica intima that they have, no tunica media or tunica externa. There are parts of the body where there are no capillaries. Epithelium is not vascularized at all. Any epithelial tissue does not have blood vessels. But epithelium is thin, so diffusion from connective tissue is enough. Cornea, otherwise you would see the network of capillaries. Cartilage, okay. Matrix of the cartilage doesn't have any blood vessels. Capillaries are next, okay, every cell of the body is no farther than 50 micrometers from capillary. You don't have to know that number. I'm not going to ask you this. You're not going to have a question, how far is a cell from capillary? No. But just to give you an appreciation for that. So capillaries is so branched that there's not a single cell in the body that would be farther than 50 micrometers from a given capillary. And the function of them is exchange. Okay, does that make sense? Think about this. You have like express train, which is arteries, that goes onto the station, but unlike normal train, it doesn't stop. Instead, it goes very, very, very slow. So slow that the passengers, oxygen, CO2, nutrients, hormones, urea, can go from the platform to the train and back virtually without any problem. Does that make sense? And then it starts to accelerate in the veins. It doesn't go as fast as it was in arteries, but it still goes faster. Blood in the veins is faster than blood in the capillaries. Alright? Good? Any questions before we go break. Awesome.